the rainbow. Why, then, oh why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh why can't
Yip Harburg, the words, Harold Arlen, the music. And here on the score sheet, another profitable collaboration, in spite of all my best efforts, a victory for Frank Beer and John Amis. Goodbye.
Tomorrow night on 2, Bernstein on Mahler, a complete performance of the song cycle Des Knaben Wunderhorn, conducted by Leonard Bernstein with Walten Grunross and Lucia Popp.
Here, Mahler is writing pure Bavarian milkmaid music. But only moments later, he is screaming out the cruelest, most relentless war march I have ever heard.
Bernstein on Mahler, tomorrow at 8:30 on 2. In this week's edition of Now the War is Over, we look back to the first years of peace, which turned out to be tougher than expected, and we hear tales of whale meat and snook, of spivs, and the black market.
My dream after the war, or one of my dreams, was to buy a £1/4 block of milk chocolate and eat it all up myself, all at one go. I didn't care if I would be sick.
During the war, life in Britain had been reduced to the barest essentials. U-boat attacks on the Atlantic convoys had cut supplies of food and raw materials, and the war effort had taken up most of what could be produced at home. Food, clothes, and fuel were rationed. With the war over, the first supplies from abroad reached Britain.
An extremely important arrival was, of course, the good ship Tilapa, coming into Avonmouth from the West Indies with a cargo of about 10 million bananas. This was the first consignment to reach Britain since 1940, so naturally it was a big event.
I do remember giving one to my younger son, who was then age 7. I gave him a banana and he said, "What on earth is this?"
And this shows you what 6 years without a banana has done to this young man. He's forgotten how to tackle the darn thing.
To us, it was like a piece of sculpture. It wasn't like a piece of fruit. We was touching it and moving it around.
We heard her crying, and when we went, she was spitting it out, that she'd bitten through the skin.
My mother, because she'd seen bananas before the war, she came and she says, "You're not eating all that on your own," and she chopped it in half and destroyed the whole image of it.
The euphoria of victory was short-lived. For people expecting an end to wartime austerity, there was disappointment in store.
This is the BBC Home Service. Here is the 8 o'clock news. Sir John Ingram, speaking of the economic crisis at Worcester last night, warned the people of Britain to face further cuts in the near future.
I think we all imagined that when the war was over, We should get back almost immediately to non-rationing, to the things we wanted, the clothes we wanted to wear, the food we wanted. But of course, it didn't come for years.
Within weeks of the election, the new Labour government was plunged into crisis. The war had left Britain almost bankrupt. Imports would have to be kept right down, raw materials directed to the export trade. After the chaos of war, two bad harvests forced more rationing on the British to prevent others from starving.
The question really was on whom should it fall, the Indians or the Chinese or the Burmese or the Germans or the British, or who? That was really the question we faced.
The wartime restrictions would have to stay. Rationing had begun in 1940 with bacon, butter and sugar. By 1945, one person's daily ration looked like this. The system was strict, but people had accepted it as part of the war effort.
I think if there hadn't have been rationing, it would have been chaotic. I couldn't visualise what would have happened. You know, I could imagine that half of us would have looked like prison camp refugees, and the other half would have been very fat.
I don't think anyone expected that rationing would be ended straight away. They just realised it wasn't possible, but I think a lot of people hoped that what we would get would be more food on the ration.
The Canadian crop and the American crop also.
Instead, there was less. In May 1946, John Strachey was appointed Minister of Food. 2 months later, the government took a controversial decision.
Mr. Strachey, why has it become necessary to ration bread?
Well, the reason we've got to ration bread is because we're short of wheat. And what I mean by that is that our...
Rationing fitted in with the Labour Party's belief in fair shares. But when bread was rationed for the first time, there was a public outcry. And there was worse to come.
A few weeks ago, I read in the newspaper that we were going to get more food. Now it seems it's going to be less fat. And if we get much less, there'll be none at all. It's queue for everything. In fact, it's far worse now than it was during the war.
You didn't often queue for ration stuff. The stuff that you were queuing for was non-rationed. Therefore, you knew that it was something special or something that other people were having and you weren't having.
It's so excruciatingly boring to just stand for hours and hours and then just to achieve something simple like a loaf of bread.
Well, you queued for almost everything, almost absolutely everything. And if you saw a queue, you joined it regardless.
On a Saturday we might get quite a bit of a queue, especially if someone had spotted a box of oranges coming in or as things were getting better, a box of bananas.
The Mucklows opened their shop in 1945.
We had the problem with getting stock, of course, but there seemed to be some sympathy for me as I'd just come out of the forces, you see, wounded. We managed to get things like tin soup and that sort of thing. We used to face up the fittings to make them look as though they were full, when in fact, of course, they were all empty at the back.
For the housewife, shopping for the family meal was a frustrating ordeal.
Honestly, I'm beginning to dread each new day. I get up wondering what I'm going to give the boys to eat, and the stuff I have to put in front of their father doesn't bear thinking about. I did hope we might have it a bit easier now that there's no more war, but instead of that, it's worse.
From Whitehall, civil servants encouraged the art of making do.
High up at the Ministry of Food's office in a London square is a very ordinary-looking kitchen. Now, this is where those recipes sent in by listeners to the kitchen front broadcasts are brought to be tried out.
When the war ended, I was still attached to the Ministry of Food in the Food Advice Division. All the time there was a cry, what could I do when I have no meat left this week, when I can't get sausages, when I'm running out of sugar? And so all the time one was looking for something new to make the rations interesting and palatable.
If he's fed up with his food, she gets the blame. But there are always new ideas about in Food Facts. It's in all the papers every week.
I remember making sausages, because sausages were very prized. I mean, you might have to stand for 45 minutes to get a pound of sausages. I remember making these from rolled oats and, almost no bacon at all, the bits that, you know, you could hardly see. Lots of vegetables to eke them out.
Off Cape Town, the fishing fleets are busy landing shoals of snook, S-N-O-E-K. It's a fish already well known to us by name, and we'll be tasting it in tin form before very long. They're savage looking, but good eating, and thanks to South Africa, a welcome addition to the national diet.
Food was pretty scarce, and food that we could afford to import and buy and produce. Dr. Edith Summerskill, who at that time was Parliamentary Secretary, I think it was, to the Ministry of Food, snapped up a shipload of this stuff. And if you analyze it, it was full of protein. It was a highly nourishing food, but it was rather salty and rank in flavour, and the British public did not take to it at all.
Whale meat came into the country, and I've talked to lots of people about whale meat, and the moment I start talking about it, I can smell it.
They said, let's try it out, and they brought some whale meat to UK, and butchers butchered it, and I got a lovely slab, about 6 pounds, of whale steak. Now, we had been starved of things like steak, because it was too expensive to get on the rations, you didn't get much of it. And then we cut it off, and we grilled it, and when we served it out, and we looked at this, and we sort of, our mouths were drooling, a lovely jump of juicy steak, and you put it in your mouth, and you start biting it, and it tasted like steak. And then as you went on biting, hum, yum, yum, the taste of steak was suddenly overcome by a strong flavour of cod liver oil.
At Boodle's Club, members helped the chef top up the menu.
I was very lucky working at such a club because many of the members went to Scotland on holidays. They hunted, they shot, they fished. And so overnight the train would come down from Scotland, and arriving in the club the following morning would be the British Rail carrier with maybe rush baskets of salmon. I'd sometimes have as many as 10 salmon coming in the morning, ranging from £7 to £50. That was the best one I ever had. One morning the butcher said to me, well, I've got something for you today. Went to the cold room and pulled out this animal, which looked delicious. Plump, the grain was fine, it was a beaver. And I looked in horror when he said it was a beaver. But I thought, well, it looks good. So I said, send it in. So when we got it back to the club, we dug around the cold room, got some bits and pieces, some onions, some bread, some herbs. We made a stuffing. We stuffed it. We found some whole bits of fat bacon, and we coated it. And we put it in the oven and gave it a nice, slow, steady roast. It smelled quite nice. The steward came down for the menu. What we got on today, chef? Roast and stuffed beaver, I said. We sold 2 portions. The name beat it. I had some for my lunch. It was quite nice. It was a tender one, young one, but I don't think I'd want to repeat the experience.
Horse meat is rapidly becoming part of Britain's diet. 3 million people buy it every week, though less than half that number know it.
This lorry pulled up, and out the back was all this blood and these dead horse carcasses, and they were sort of unceremoniously thrown off this lorry into this yard where a man started cutting them up and weighing them into sections, and I was sort of pushed forward, and I had to ask for a piece of steak, and he carved off a piece of this horse meat in newspaper and just dumped it into this shopping bag, and I took it home.
The British Medical Association found that although the national diet was just as healthy as before the war,
dissatisfaction with monotonous and unappetizing food cannot but have a depressing effect on national morale.
But we were perfectly healthy. We made the very best of what there was available, just like squirrels. We managed, and we were very healthy, but there's no doubt about it, the diet was dull.
for Vera Mather, there was no escape from austerity, even on the most important of days.
I was dreaming of meeting someone and marrying and having a home of my own, and I think I'd resigned myself, very disappointed, to having a short wedding dress. And a friend of mine who worked in Liverpool said, oh, such and such a store's had a delivery. So I took the day off work the next day and went to Liverpool. And when I got there, all they had left was one pink dress, pink wedding dress. I could have wept because I never wore pink in my life. And My parents were rather ill-fashioned, and to wear anything but white suggested that you were, well, not a very good person. And my father, as soon as he saw it, what on earth will the neighbours say, a pink wedding dress? It kind of took the pleasure out of the wedding, really.
The outlook in fashions for 1946 is still austerity. It could hardly be otherwise with clothing coupons fewer than ever and the world in its present state. Interested audiences have been attending the dress shows, where although the models have of course been elegant, no great changes in line and detail have been apparent. This show at Selfridge's was of British costumes.
Skirts were allowed 4 pleats, 1 at the back and 3 at the front. And so many buttons, I think it was 3 on a jacket, no buttons on the cuffs for men or women. So you improvised.
It meant the one took father's breeches that the knees had gone out of them and cut the best parts of them and made trousers for Johnny or a skirt for little Anne.
I always thought women's hats could be made out of pretty well anything, and here comes the proof. For all these hats are made from rugs and carpets. So if you've got any old bits of Axminster, Wilton, Bokhara, or even a spare bath mat, why not cut them up and be in the fashion?
Clothes rationing touched all levels. James Freer was a herald at the 1948 state opening of Parliament.
The way I got my uniform was to ask dear friends and relations of mine if they would contribute towards the uniform by giving me some of their coupons, which they did. And then I had it made by Eden Ravenscroft. It cost an enormous amount of money in those days, some £400. And when I came to shake hands with the King and the Queen Mary to thank them for the occasion, and was about to leave, the King, in quite a loud voice and in front of everybody, called me back to him and said, "Isn't that a new uniform you're wearing? Where did you get it? Must have been very expensive, wasn't it?"
Even the court tailors had problems clothing the new peers of the realm and the Garter Knights.
Eden Ravenscroft only had enough black velvet to make 1 hat for the 5 that were needed, and they were at their wits' end to know where to get material with the restrictions. But as luck would have it, I had a very magnificent black velvet skirt which had belonged to my great-grandmother, and I offered that to them. They accepted it with alacrity and made the 4 extra hats for the Knights of the Garter. And ever after that, when one looked at the knights, one wondered which were wearing one's great-grandmother's skirt on their heads.
Let me say at once that we don't know whether any of these nylon stockings will be in Britain by Christmas or not. Even if they are, we're prepared to bet there won't be anything like enough to go round. But at least we can see that they are being made, and if anyone hopes to get a pair, well, there's no harm in hoping. Save some coupons and go on, keep on queuing. They may turn up.
Stockings were a perfect pain in the neck. We had a daughter who was nursing at St Bartholomew's in London, and they had to wear black stockings, which are very difficult to get in those days. So you had to make passes at the manager of the stocking department in your store.
Very often you'd just go without stockings, or else, like I did and plenty others of my age, we wore liquid leg makeup. And we'd get a friend to draw a black line up the back of our legs and a heel, you know, pretending it was a stocking, an imitation.
Tantalizing, isn't it? They actually fit. Sorry, no good calling at the box office afterwards. We don't know where you can find them.
You kind of wondered whether it would ever end. there didn't seem to be any end to it. We just got used to making do with things or without things. I don't think anybody really bothered. We just, I suppose, indoctrinated into it.
With so much out of reach, the authorities promoted austerity as a virtue, even a way of life.
We all take porridge and milk, and I encourage the girls to take fruit juice before their breakfast. Toast and marmalade is a favourite with us all. With father away on time, I see that Sheila and Angela are correctly dressed and have handkerchiefs, school books, pens, pencils, and money for their car fares and for the school dinner. And then to work, washing up, first glass, then cutlery, then dishes, and finally pots and pans. Then there's the living room, grate to clear and the fire to lay, and then the room to tidy up for the chance visitor. A few minutes spent reading the paper helps to keep me up to date with the news, but I mustn't forget the biscuits. And here comes my sister. When she's got time to spare, I get an afternoon off. Well, goodbye. I'll be back at 5. I'm going gay. Yes, it's a sewing bee, and what a grand thing it is. It means that any sewing, mending, or knitting can be done in company with others who've got the same interest. And we can have a good gossip without wasting any time.
Glimpses of a different life came from across the Atlantic.
You went to the films and you saw all these wonderful clothes, and you tried to imitate them the best you could on your rations.
Hollywood fashions can afford to be elaborate. Hollywood film stars aren't rationed. That skirt must take yards of lace. But certainly these fashions would create a bit of a sensation at most 1946 Christmas parties in Britain. If one had the money, one could get them copied, I dare say, if one had the coupons.
America meant fashion and plenty of everything, all the things that we didn't have.
It seemed to be a land of everything, you know, a land of milk and honey, where there's us poor little English people or British people had virtually nothing, and they seemed to have everything.
In 1946, Hartley Shawcross saw for himself.
We had white bread, as much as we wanted, instead of that rather dreary grey-coloured material we were eating at home. We had as much butter as we wanted. We had caviar, pâté de foie gras, steaks, everything.
Nylons! Genuine stolen nylons!
This Ealing comedy brought to life the dream of a corner of Britain freed from rationing.
Of course, one of the effects of rationing was that quite many people felt that they must somehow or other get round the regulations, stretch them in some way, secure an advantage which wasn't available to the general public.
10, 11, button up them pop.
At the heart of the black market was the spiv.
Well, the spivvy types just after the war were the sort of cheap jack barrow boy type who sold from suitcases on pavements, and sometimes they had barrows of fruit.
When one saw a man with side whiskers or sideboards coming down here, one invariably said, "Good Lord, he looks like a spiv."
Actually, he was the man who had a full-time job almost on the black market. The spiv was the fellow who knew everybody, and he was the kind of guy who would sidle up to you and say, "Psst, want a pair of nylons?"
I wasn't a big spiv. I was only a very little spiv. A big spiv was someone who sold things in thousands, and he didn't necessarily look like a spiv. I got him mobbed at Woking in Surrey. A spiv came up to me and says, "Hey mate, give me 10 quid for your mob suit." So then I sold it. I was also given a certain amount of clothing coupons, which I didn't need, again, because I brought plenty of gear back from abroad with me. So I sold the clothing coupons. I thought, now, this is a very, very lucrative racket, this.
You had the black market of food,
you had the black market of clothes. Now then, I found the clothing was invaluable because you only sort of had a short supply of clothing coupons.
I found a way that I could buy clothing coupons, probably from, well, from people who used to like a drink. They probably had families, but in particular women who used to go for a drink at lunchtimes in the pubs. And you get talking to them. I said they had their clothing coupons to sell, and a lot of them had. And I used to buy them off these women for 6p or a shilling each. I used to sell them in some of the better class districts to people for 3 shillings and 3 and 6.
On one occasion, we sat in the house. A knock came at the door. Are you finding rationing very difficult? Oh, yes. Do you like salmon? Oh, one of my favourite foods with a salad. You know, I love salmon. He said, with some here, he said, that fell off the back of a lorry. He said, would you like the case full for £2? So, definitely. Well, don't let anybody see it. Oh, no, we'll keep it down in the cellar. So after we'd had it about a week, and I think we had salmon every day for a week, you know, sandwiches in various forms, we had this salmon. And one of the neighbours came in one day. Oh, is that salmon? It was vet salmon as well. Yes. Can I have a taste? Oh, you can have a tin for £0.5. So we sold them a tin for £0.5, and we made about £4 interest.
I'd say I was guilty as anyone else in trying to pinch a loaf of bread from a shop or an apple from a market stall. And in fact, it was just a way of life that if you could do these things and get away with them, then you know it didn't seem to be criminal to do it.
For the police, the black market meant more work.
We had a lot of petty offences at that time. A larger number of them were food offences, where no doubt the certain sections of the population had been deprived owing to food rationing, and it was part of our duty occasionally, if we had reasonable suspicion, to stop people in the streets, and we'd often find they were in possession of foodstuffs stolen or unlawfully obtained, and subsequently many of them unfortunately had to be charged with either stealing or food offences.
Writing in 1947, Birmingham's police chief blamed the increase in crime on
shortages of all kinds of rationed foods in great public demand and stolen property finding a ready market to persons who would not normally purchase such goods.
Sometimes I might bring home a cabbage or some potatoes, and usually my mother used to get very indignant and give me a clip round the ear, but she never made me take it back. She always made sure it was on the menu for that evening's dinner.
There you are, dear. Eat it up. It's your bacon ration for the week, so you may as well enjoy it. I'm sorry about the toast. I don't know how that happened. There wasn't even enough pressure in here to light the stove, let alone burn a piece of bread. Oh, no.
For those who preferred to keep on the right side of the law, patience was running out.
Do you know, I spent 2.5 hours in the queues yesterday, and all I came back with was 3 sausages and 2 pounds of artichokes. The vegetable queue got so political that they had 3 governments all in power at the same time by the time I got to the front. I don't know which is worse, the grumbling in the queues or the rudeness of the tradespeople. I'm sure I don't know what's happening to people these days.
Women were very cross. They were very cross with how they were being treated by shopkeepers. They'd had a very raw deal during the war. There was a great deal of queuing, and some shopkeepers, such as fishmongers, had made a habit of expecting women to queue up for at least an hour outside their shops before they'd even open the door. And until they'd seen a nice long queue down the pavement, they wouldn't open up. And then they'd sell a bit of fish, and then after half an hour they'd say no more and bang the shutters down again. And after 5 or 6 years, women were very fed up with that sort of thing.
That's your ration for the week. There's no more.
Is this so?
That's the lot.
Well, what am I supposed to do with that?
What you like?
And one day there was a wonderful story going round that this Mr. So-and-so had been hit by one of his customers who'd picked up a haddock and gone for him.
And when the Pathé reporter gave the ladies a chance, he got some good home truths.
One little bit of steak on Friday, and blimey, we've had it for the rest of the week then. We'd like to know what happens to all the offal. Haven't the pigs got any innards? Good God, what do the men live on? Threepence of meat? Disgusting.
Did you say a few words to move it on yours? We never say any words.
Chancellor from September 1947, Sir Stafford Cripps was a symbol of the government's austerity policy.
The Chancellor of the Exchequer is the nation's housekeeper, and like the family housekeeper, I often have to refuse you all sorts of things, which seems hard to you, and it seems hard to me too. I only wish I didn't have to say no.
It was his unfortunate task to stand before the consumers of Britain and tell them that there was to be no more of anything for the time being, because there was a shortage of currency to buy food and there was a shortage of currency to buy goods, and we had to export or die. And it was a fairly unwelcome sort of message.
I want to tell you what an encouragement it's been to have so much help.
He was something of a symbol of austerity.
I know this Christmas won't be a luxury one, and the Jew housewives are going to have a hard...
Austere and detached, he was in his way a very great man who made a contribution at that time.
It's the cheerful facing of our difficulties.
These policies had to be followed, and there weren't many people who could have convinced the public they were necessary.
Look what I've got to put up with. Do you ever hear me grumble?
I tell you, in 5 years' time there won't be any worries, because there won't be anything left to worry about.
Less of everything, except, of course, work and trouble. How much longer is it going on?
You think we've reached the bottom, not on your life.
I think the lowest ebb that I ever reached was when I asked my mother for a belt, and she gave me a lady's cloth belt that she'd taken off of a dress. And to me, the thing that I really, really wanted was what was called a snake belt. It's got like a little stripe down it and a little snake on the clip, because all my friends at school were wearing these belts. And here was my mother giving me this cloth belt. And, you know, I felt really, really despondent at that time.
Watch it, Gloomy. Everybody's gloomy these days. Why should I be out of fashion?
People were really tired. They didn't have a roast beef on Sunday, great big fat lunch to cheer them up once a week, because there wasn't the meat and there wasn't this and that. And everything was difficult. We stood in queues for food, and we went to a shop to buy woolen socks, and there was no wool and there were no socks, and you worried about all kinds of things that you'd never had to worry about before, except in wartime, and it was peacetime.
Mary Blakey and June MacDonald brought their protest onto the streets under the banner of the British Housewives League. It was founded by Irene Lovelock, a vicar's wife from Kent. Stafford Cripps said the League was unpatriotic, but Mrs. Lovelock gave voice to growing frustration with austerity.
It would be true to say, Mrs. Lovelock, that you have inspired women to rise against this hangover of war.
Yes, and I do believe that a nationwide rising of the housewives would end this terrible curse of queuing.
It sprang up just from mid-air, really. I think there was a letter in the press, probably from Mrs. Lovelock, and certainly I would have written to her, and lots and lots and lots of other ladies wrote to her, and in no time at all a committee was formed and we were in business.
June MacDonald became secretary of the League. Women in their thousands signed up as Mrs. Lovelock spread her message.
Irene Lovelock was quite certain that the family was the backbone of the country, and something had to be done to improve conditions of the housewife in the family. It was as though you could get things via institutions, but not via your mother and father.
The rich people will not suffer. It's the middle class, the poor people, the people with children. They're the ones that's going to suffer.
Well, we certainly kept the issues that concerned us before our politicians of all parties and the ministers, and that was noted. It must have had, like a tide, it must have had an effect upon the beach.
There was absolutely no question of us attacking the government as such. After about 18 months, I felt that certain sections of the Conservative press were beginning to take over the Housewives' League and using it in a way that I didn't feel happy about. I resigned at that time, not because I didn't like the League and not because I didn't like Mrs. Lovelock, but I felt that she had allowed the League to be used in a way that I wasn't happy about.
After the war, Conservatives had accepted rationing as inevitable. But by 1948, Lord Woolton, the Tory party chairman, was using it to attack the Labour government.
I wish the government would realize that to ration is to admit failure to get sufficient supply. I'd take a risk and get rid of some of this rationing.
They thought this was the thing that was going to get us down. And of course they were helped by the almost total conservative press, giving the impression that we were doing it just for some ideological reasons. The reason we did it was there was no food.
What a mess this country is in today. Tired, mentally defeated by petty restrictions which have destroyed the will to work. No wonder we have drifted into crisis and disaster.
No, I'm sorry, madam. It's for export only.
No cigarettes.
No matches.
Not today. I'm afraid not.
No eggs.
No. No.
No.
No. No.
No. No. No. No. No. No.
No.
No.
No.
I'm sure the rationing policy which we felt compelled to pursue was extremely unpopular with the mass of the public who didn't simply understand these things, and was one of the factors which contributed to the growing unpopularity of the government as time went on and rationing continued.
With the new look, fashion designers responded with defiantly lavish creations.
Oh, that was tremendous. Of course, very wicked, and we were ever so cross about it, because there was Christian Dior lowering the hemlines almost to the ankle with enormously full skirts and little slim tops like this, and nothing that we had in the cupboard was any longer in fashion. And an awful lot of us said, oh, we can't afford it, we can't buy it, but of course we all did.
I can't remember how far it went down, whether it was to the ankles or just a little higher than that. And I think everyone, all the ladies, thought it was a wonderful chance. Though, of course, it did create problems for me with coupons.
Youngest cabinet member since Pitt, Wilson is old enough for discretion when questioned on the long skirt controversy.
I think that at this present time, with the shortage of materials and of manpower, most people would agree it just doesn't make sense to have the skirts longer than they have been in the past.
But for housewives, the black market had made a mockery of official claims about shortages.
They seek them here, they seek them there. But always they seem to end up on that pavement pitch where stocks are high, business is brisk, and life's only worry is taken care of by the lookout man.
By 1949, the government had got the message. The days of the spiv were numbered.
The government decided, in their wisdom, that clothes were coming off ration. So overnight, I lost the biggest source of my income.
I have just come here straight from the House of Commons, where I have just announced the ending of the clothing rationing scheme. This doesn't mean that we are going to slow up on our export drive for clothing or for textiles.
As the economy revived and industry settled down to peacetime production, an end to austerity seemed in sight.
The songwriter's dream has come true. The lights are on again all over the world, even in austerity Britain. The Minister of Fuel wants everybody to know that the coal used to bring back a little light-hearted gaiety to London is off the ration stuff.
But Labour had become typecast as the party of restriction. They were an easy target for Tory election propaganda.
The freedom they were talking about, of course, wasn't sort of letting them out of jail or that we sent more people to jail than they did. What they meant was free to go into a shop and spend their money and spend it on this rather than that if they wanted.
Some people were no doubt attracted by the argument that let's do away with all these regulations. So let's forget that a great many rations had been abandoned. I mean, clothes, bread and petrol rationing had all been abandoned before the 51 elections, and I think those were probably the three most irksome ones.
Coffee, white or black? You pay your money and you take your pick. And take your pick, then pay your money just about sums up this revolution in modern shopping habits. What began as a wartime necessity to combat staff shortage has become part of the economic system of the retail trade.
By 1950, more goods were returning to the shelves. Although rationing was still in force and would continue well into the new decade, little luxuries were no longer out of reach.
I was bought a new pair of grey flannel trousers and a grey flannel shirt and a little grey pullover, and there was still a few pounds or a few pence or a few shillings left out of the money. So I said to the man, could I have that snake belt? So I got my snake belt in the end.
Well, I just carried on the best way I could for a while, but then eventually I had to go out to work. I had to join the rat race.
In the 50s, austerity gave way to a consumer boom. But for many who had lived through these times, making do had left its mark.
I tend to hoard things, you know, even though they're past wearing or really old-fashioned or shoes that you probably will never wear again. You're frightened of throwing them away in case you need them.
I don't say I still wear my pyjama tops as blouses, but I still use everything. I don't like throwing things away. I'll always find a use for it.
That's something that never leaves you. I can't throw anything away. Milk tops, brown paper bags, pins, awful.